Just 3 seconds. That was all it took for an employee at the Heathrow first-class lounge to decide that Julian Rhodes didn't belong there. He walked in, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, carrying himself with quiet composure and the depth in his eyes of someone who had seen enough summits and abysses. But to them, all they saw was the color of his skin. They had no idea they had just triggered a chain of events that would shake an entire airline empire. What do you think happens when a black tech genius, the man behind the AI systems used by the UK government, NATO, and dozens of major corporations, is treated like an intruder in a space he helped create? This story isn't just about a man facing racial discrimination. It's about how he strikes back with a strategy that brings an entire industry to its knees. Julian Rhodes, 42 years old, founder and CEO of Airline, a technology empire valued in the tens of billions of pounds. To many, he's a living icon, the first black man to make it onto The Economist's list of the top 10 most influential people in Europe. He has spoken at Davos, advised governments on AI strategy, and, most importantly, rose from an orphan child in South London to become a name the financial world deeply respects. But on that fateful morning at Heathrow, none of his accomplishments were enough to convince a lounge receptionist that he actually had a first-class ticket. And that moment, as the media would later call it, became the day they awakened a man who had spent his entire life preparing to confront injustice. Within 72 hours, the name Julian Rhodes went from being quietly respected to the center of the greatest crisis in Crown Atlantic Airlines history. A silent but devastating counteroffensive, Protocol Obsidian, was activated, enlisting former MI6 agents, cybersecurity experts, and a high-level coalition of elite operatives. But this story isn't just about Julian. It's also about Caroline Ellis, an intern who witnessed everything and chose not to stay silent. About Victor Cheng, an Asian-American security supervisor torn between following procedure and doing what's right. And about millions around the world, people who, for the first time, clearly saw how the system works and who it was really designed to serve. This is a story about justice that was dismissed and power used precisely when it mattered most. Are you ready? Because when Protocol Obsidian is activated, ignorance is no longer an option. The Bentley door opened in the soft morning drizzle of London. Julian Rhodes stepped out, tall with rich brown skin, his charcoal gray bespoke suit fitting him flawlessly. He stood before Terminal 5 at Heathrow Airport, his neatly cropped hair unmoving in the wind, his hand holding a matte black suitcase made specifically for tech industry executives. No one looking at Julian could have guessed he once grew up in a makeshift shelter in Brixton, surviving on government food tins and teaching himself to code with library books. Now, he was the CEO and founder of Airline, the company powering AI systems for over 50 international airports, including Heathrow itself. But for the woman standing at the entrance to the Crown Atlantic first-class lounge, all she saw was a misfit. "Sorry, this area is for first-class passengers only," her voice rang out, cold and sharp like steel. Julian looked at her. Blonde hair, heavy makeup, a name tag that read Marion Holloway, customer service supervisor. He replied calmly, "I'm aware. I have a first-class ticket on flight CA-103 to San Francisco." Marion frowned, her eyes scanning him as if trying to pierce through his Armani fabric. She took his ticket and passport, flipping through them like she was hunting for a stain, a reason to deny entry. Though the documents were fully valid, she didn't smile. "We'll need to do a bit of additional verification, Miss Rhodes." Julian nodded, far too familiar with that bit of coded suspicion. Inside there was no anger, only a deep chill, an old scratch that never quite healed. The times he was followed in luxury car showrooms, the random bag checks, the ignored handshakes, and now, here, at an airport his own company helped optimize, he was being treated like a fraud. A security officer arrived, summoned by Marion's glare. "What's the issue?" he asked. "Possible mismatch in credentials," Marion answered. "There's no mismatch," Julian countered, calm and firm. "My name, my photo, my ticket, all align. I am a first-class passenger, and if you require additional confirmation, I can show you my Amex Centurion card or my Executive Elite Crown Atlantic membership, held for 5 consecutive years." The officer glanced at Marion. She hesitated, but instead of backing off, she tried steering the situation her way. It appears this ticket was booked through a corporate account. We need to verify the actual purchaser. Julian sighed, pulling out his phone. He pressed a shortcut. Obsidian. He spoke quietly into the mic. Initiate observation mode. Just one sentence, but it carried more weight than 1,000 rebuttals. Because when Julian Rhodes activates Protocol Obsidian, it's no longer personal. It's a declaration, a systemic counterattack with power, data, and truth as weapons. No one in the lounge knew it yet. But a storm was forming, and it began in the eyes of a man who had always been quiet, but never powerless. From a distance, a young man in a Crown Atlantic intern uniform watched everything unfold. His name was Ezra Thomas, a final-year aerospace engineering student interning with the airport's IT technical team. He recognized Julian immediately. In Ezra's world, Julian Rhodes was a living legend, the man who created the flight optimization algorithm that once helped his mother avoid a life-threatening flight delay. With trembling fingers, he typed out a message to his best friend in the systems department. They just kicked Julian Rhodes out of the lounge, no joke. Publicly humiliated, people are going to find out. And that was when the ripple began. From a small message on a phone screen, to the tech network, to the media department, and eventually into a system once thought untouchable. On the top floor of Orion Tech headquarters in Canary Wharf, a woman was watching. Short hair, piercing eyes, the composure of an operative. Her name was Caroline Voss, Global Security Director of Orion Tech, and formerly head of strategic analysis for MI6. When the Obsidian signal was triggered, she understood instantly. This wasn't just about Julian being disrespected. This was the moment to dismantle an entire machinery of bias, concealment, and manipulation. Caroline pulled up a live data map. The entire Crown Atlantic infrastructure, maintenance, HR, media, finance, was now under covert observation. It wasn't being attacked. It was being watched. Every crack, every weak point, every buried secret. And she was ready to peel back the layers one by one. Julian won't strike back in anger, she whispered. He'll strike with truth. And truth is the one thing that system can't survive. Back at Heathrow, Marion Holloway had no idea what was about to hit. To her, Julian Rhodes was just a black man lucky enough to win the lottery, now trying to force his way into a world that wasn't meant for him. But she was wrong. Julian didn't want to force his way in. He came to change it forever. The Crown Atlantic first-class security lounge gleamed, silent, luxurious, and cold. Julian Rhodes walked alongside a security officer named Blake, a silver-haired man with a programmed tone and blank expression, leaving the check-in area under Marion Holloway's polite request for further verification. He didn't resist. He didn't need to. Any emotional reaction would be misread. He had learned that the hard way. "Thank you for your cooperation, sir," Blake said, monotone. "We just need to run a few more checks." Julian nodded. There was no submission in his eyes, only quiet calculation. Every sidelong glance, every subtle shuffle away from him in the hallway, he absorbed them all like code, data points in a living algorithm. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'll need to hold on to your boarding pass," Marion said, straining to sound courteous, but failing to hide her need for control. "Your ticket was purchased via a corporate account, and we need to verify that you're the authorized traveler." Julian didn't answer right away. He opened his wallet and placed on the counter a gleaming black American Express Centurion card, along with his Crown Atlantic Platinum membership card, engraved with his name, 5 consecutive years of executive elite status. "My card. My name on the ticket. My travel history is in your system." His voice was calm, steady, not loud, not soft, but somehow it made the air tighten. Marion hesitated. For the first time, she looked at him and seemed to question herself. Meanwhile, deep beneath the airport, in the Technical Operations Center, Ezra Thomas, the young intern who had witnessed it all, stood glued to the control panel, typing furiously. "Derek, look at this," he told his friend, a systems engineer for Crown Atlantic. "They just blocked access for someone named Julian Rhodes. But look, he's the guy who wrote the behavioral analytics engine this airline uses to sell its tickets." Derek, disheveled hair, thick glasses, frowned as he scrolled through the code. "You're kidding, right? Julian Rhodes? The guy who signed that £800 million contract with Crown Atlantic 3 years ago? His Orion system runs half this airport." Ezra nodded, eyes wide. "I saw it with my own eyes. They treated him like an intruder in his own creation. Derek exhaled sharply. The world's lost its mind. Go back to acting like you don't know anything. I'll check for internal leaks. If Julian's launching a counterstrike, it might have already begun. At the same time, on the 43rd floor of Orion Tech HQ, Caroline Voss sat before a control panel, eyes locked onto the constantly updating data grid. A team of technical operatives combed through every stream flowing through Crown Atlantic systems. There's movement on their internal network, one engineer reported. A batch of emails just got flagged. Urgent, sensitive content. Subject, incident at the airport. Caroline didn't blink. She simply asked, who's the sender? Marion Holloway. She sent it to the PR team and legal. Who else is CC'd? No one. Caroline nodded. Then they know they screwed up, and now they're trying to cover it up before it gets out. She stood, her voice sharp. Track all edits in their mail servers. Activate Obsidian Tier 2 financial surveillance and personnel history. Pull 6 months' worth. An assistant spoke up. Should we go for a direct strike? Caroline shook her head. No. What we're doing isn't an attack. We're letting them trip over the truth, and the truth is always more powerful than any punch. In the airport's security observation room, Julian sat upright, his gaze calm but prepared. Blake, the supervisor, sat across the table, flipping through files, though his eyes lingered on Julian's face longer than necessary. You're the CEO of Orion Tech? Blake asked. Yes. That company supplies AI systems to this airport. Correct. Blake was silent for a few seconds. Then why are you being held here? Julian gave a small, humorless smile. You tell me. Blake didn't respond, but there was a flicker of unease in his expression. I need verification from higher up, he muttered, then walked out. As the door closed, Julian picked up his phone, opened an encrypted app, and sent a single signal. Stage 2 passive infiltration. At Orion Tech HQ, Caroline received the alert. Her command was swift. Unlock Crown Atlantic's flight safety archives. Prioritize passenger complaints, concealed technical failures, offshore payments. Across town, at Crown Atlantic headquarters, a sleek glass tower in the heart of London, CEO Anthony Whitaker was reviewing Marion Holloway's urgent email. He frowned. Julian Rhodes? Him again? The head of PR looked worried. We think it may have been a misunderstanding, but the incident is already spreading internally among IT staff. Shut it down. Draft a standard statement. We apologize for any inconvenience. Remain committed to equality, yada yada. Sir, he has massive online influence in our systems. How long will they stay ours? Whitaker cut her off, voice sharp. I won't let one minority shake the foundations of the UK's top airline. He didn't realize it yet, but he had just signed his own downfall, not just for his career, but for the entire empire he sat atop. Julian no longer needed to react. He was rewriting the entire game. At Orion Tech's Technical Coordination Center in Leeds, data streams from Crown Atlantic's internal systems began to appear, like blood seeping through a white shirt. There was no doubt anymore. Caroline Voss and her team had unlocked the back door, a hidden access point that Julian himself had embedded the day he first signed the airline contract. There's a notable email chain, one team member reported, fingers gliding over a touchscreen. From Marion Holloway to the HR department 2 weeks ago. Read it, Caroline instructed. The engineer expanded the message and read aloud. Passengers like Mr. Rhodes require closer monitoring. I don't care how many stars are on their loyalty cards. Their presence in premium lounges makes our traditional clients uncomfortable. Caroline pressed her lips together. It wasn't the smoking gun, but it was a start. A small piece of a much larger puzzle coming into focus. What about the complaints log? She asked. Over 30 entries labeled no action required in the last 18 months, the engineer replied. Nearly 70% involve black or minority passengers being mistreated at boarding gates or in lounges. Move everything to folder Obsidian 3, Caroline ordered. I want a full report in 2 hours. In a quiet corner of Heathrow, intern Ezra sat in the employee break area, eyes fixed on his phone as messages poured in from colleagues. Did you hear about the Orion CEO getting kicked out of the lounge? They're saying it's racism. Crown IT folks are going nuts over it. Ezra glanced around. A thought sparked. He opened the internal staff app and submitted an anonymous message to the feedback channel. I saw him. I saw Julian Rhodes with my own eyes, and I can't stay silent. At the top floor of Crown Atlantic HQ, CEO Anthony Whitaker received an urgent text from the head of communications. "We have a problem. There's a leak. Some social media accounts have started circulating a blurry video of Marion Holloway asking Mr. Rhodes to leave the lounge." Whitaker slammed his hand on the table. "Block everything. Send legal threats. Release a denial statement. Control the narrative before 5 p.m. But 5 p.m. was already too late. On Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, a 15-second video showing Julian Rhodes calmly standing up as two security officers escorted him out had already gone viral, with thousands of comments flooding in by the hour. Many instantly recognized him. "Wait, isn't that Julian Rhodes, the AI genius? They kicked him out of a first-class lounge? Are you serious? This is exactly why the whole system needs to burn." Posts with hashtags FlyWhaleBlack and Rhodes Protocol began trending heavily. Voices across the tech, business, and Black creative communities were rising up. At Orion Tech HQ, Julian Rhodes sat silently watching the social metrics spike in real time. Caroline stepped in. "We can go public with everything now." Julian replied with just one word: "Not yet." Caroline frowned. "What are you waiting for? The momentum is on our side." "Exactly," Julian said. "That's why we have to be careful. This isn't about personal revenge, Caroline. This is the beginning of systemic change." She nodded, not fully understanding, but trusting him, as she always had. At a cafe near the airport, Jamal, a new IT intern at Crown Atlantic, had just finished his shift. Curled up in his chair, he stared at his phone. A new message appeared from an unknown number. "I'm Caroline Voss, COO of Orion Tech. I need to speak with you privately." Jamal looked up, hands sweating. Part of him wanted to delete the message, but another part, deep inside, the part that had been swallowing rage for months at Crown, urged him to reply. "Meet me at 7 p.m., Bold Roast Cafe, behind Heathrow Station. Come alone." When Jamal hit send, he had no idea that this one decision would change the course of his entire life. At Crown Atlantic, a crisis meeting was held in a sealed room. All senior executives were present. On the big screen, a plummeting stock graph. The company's share price had dropped 7 cents in just 3 hours. "We need to initiate crisis communication," said the director of communications. "Issue an official apology." "Apology?" Whitaker hissed. "To some random black guy? A PR stunt? Absolutely not. We strike back. Dig up his files. I don't believe that Rhodes guy is clean." In the corner of the room, the legal counsel glanced at her assistant, an unspoken look. "We're playing a dangerous game." Because what they didn't know was that Julian Rhodes wasn't here to ask for kindness. He came to expose an empire that had thrived far too long on the silence of others. The London sky darkened. Lights flickered on at Heathrow, stretching across the runways like artificial constellations. In a quiet corner of Bold Roast Cafe, Jamal sat curled in a thin jacket, eyes fixed on the entrance. He checked the message again, right place, right time. But was he stepping into something way over his head? When the door opened, a woman walked in, tall, trenchcoat gray, natural curls cut sharp, eyes like scalpels. "Caroline Voss." "Jamal?" she asked quietly. "Yes, that's me." "Walk with me," she said briskly. "I don't like being listened to." They left the cafe and walked along the iron fence near the terminal. The wind was cold, but Caroline didn't slow down. She spoke. "Crown Atlantic has turned airport infrastructure into a control system, not just for security, but for identity. They don't see dignity, they see color, background, bias." Jamal froze. It was the first time someone had said aloud what he had only dared to think. "We're building a case," she continued. "Comprehensive, from discrimination to data manipulation. But we need someone inside, someone willing to speak up." He stayed quiet. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "You don't have to be the strongest, son. Just don't be the one who turns away from justice." "So what do you need me to do?" Caroline looked him straight in the eye. "Help me unmask this system. No sabotage, just the truth." Jamal nodded, just slightly, but that nod would take him from a nameless intern to part of the most pivotal reckoning in aviation history. At Orion Tech's operations hub, Julian was in a strategy meeting. Walls lit with data maps, flagged emails, tampered safety reports, everything digitized and categorized. "We're starting to see the picture," Caroline reported. "This isn't just prejudice. This is a deliberate structure, protected by fear, profit, and power." Julian nodded. "We move step by step, expose, counterstrike, replace." A cybersecurity analyst stepped in. "You need to hear this." He played a leaked audio clip. Marion Holloway's voice in a closed-door staff meeting. "I don't care who Rhodes is. He's black. I won't let first class turn into a Greyhound terminal. If anyone complains, I'll blame it on a system error." Caroline stood up sharply. "We have audio, we have proof." Julian looked at her, his eyes no longer just calculating. They burned with a fury forged in years of silence. "It's time to initiate Raven Phase 2. Meanwhile, at Crown Atlantic's executive offices in New York, Anthony Whitaker was grappling with forces he could no longer control. Stocks down another 4%, the CFO reported. At least 3 investment funds are requesting an emergency meeting with the board. "What the hell is going on out there?" Whitaker snapped. "All this over a meaningless video?" "No, sir," the communications chief sighed. "It's not about the video, it's about the name in the video. Julian Rhodes." The room fell silent. "Rhodes?" Whitaker repeated. "You mean that programmer? The MIT Golden Boy?" "Not just that," his aide emphasized. "The man who built the autonomous control systems now used in over 70% of major U.S. airports. The man who once refused to sell his tech to the Department of Defense on ethical grounds. And the man whose financial network is so deep, he could shift markets with a whisper." Whitaker slumped back in his chair. He didn't know who he had provoked. And now, it was too late. Not all silence is weakness. Some silences are listening and recording. Within minutes, thousands of comments poured in. "My God, what is he planning? I thought this was just a PR mishap. Now I see it clearly. It's the beginning of a takedown. Justice is coming. And it wears a tailored suit." In Orion-Tech's covert server room, Caroline connected to the internal access point Jamal had just installed, verified and live. She pulled up the network wrap. "Julian," she said, "we're inside Crown Atlantic's central nervous system." He turned, calm as a still lake, about to ripple. "Then it's time we touch their heart." Dawn hadn't even broken in New York when the communications office at Crown Atlantic was plunged into chaos. Hundreds of emails, messages, and phone calls flooded in. On morning broadcasts, Julian Rhodes's face was everywhere, not as part of a scandal, but at the center of an unprecedented media earthquake. At 6 a.m., The Guardian published a long-form exposé titled "From First Class to the Engine Room of Power, Julian Rhodes and the Fall of Crown Atlantic." The article opened with the now viral video of Julian being racially profiled in the premium lounge, then shifted quickly into a storm of revelations. Internal documents revealed Crown Atlantic had an active recheck policy for passengers deemed non-standard in business class. An AI passenger classification system trained on racially biased datasets. A string of emails among senior leadership, including Marion Holloway, using discriminatory language and deliberately delaying resolution of complaints by black passengers. Anthony Whitaker slammed the paper onto his desk, face pale. "Who leaked this?" "Oh," he roared. His assistant didn't look up. "Unknown, but the article shows the source is deep, possibly inside IT. Get Ethan Ross, now." Ethan Ross, a crisis handler who'd cleaned up messes for oil giants and Wall Street firms, entered like a cold wind. "This isn't just a leak," he said sharply. "This is a full-scale campaign, coordinated, strategic, and the target is you." "Then kill it," Whitaker barked. "Media, legal, social, hit them back." Ethan nodded. "I'll fabricate a counter-narrative, something scandalous, a fake email, a college affair, anything to muddy the waters. And if there's nothing to dig up," Ethan smirked, "then we manufacture it." Back at Orion Tech HQ, Julian met with Leah Okoro and Caroline Voss. "They're preparing to strike," Leah said, eyes glued to her screen. "I'm tracking a media subnetwork specializing in smear operations." "They won't stop at me," Julian said quietly. "They'll target anyone who stands with me. Jamal, Erica, Caroline. Do you think we should back off?" Caroline asked dryly. Julian met her gaze serene. "No, we go deeper." He nodded at Leah, who cued an audio clip. It was a recorded internal conversation among Crown Atlantic executives. One voice stood out. "If we have to choose between fixing the system or burying it with cash, I choose cash. Give the passengers a smile, a voucher, and they'll forget." Caroline scoffed. "Shame. This time, they forgot they picked the wrong man." That afternoon, CNN broke an exclusive. Sources confirm Julian Rhodes and his team are collaborating with federal investigators to release documents on discrimination and ethical violations at Crown Atlantic. The internet erupted. Hashtags Justice in the Skies, Fly While Black, and Rhodes Protocol surged to 1 worldwide within an hour. One user posted, "He didn't yell, he didn't overreact. He made a call, and an empire started to crack." At Heathrow Airport, something unexpected happened. Crown Atlantic's reservation system went down. For 15 full minutes, pages crashed, payments failed, first-class bookings were mysteriously downgraded to economy. Everything was too precise to be random. Inside a high-security IT control room, Crown Atlantic engineers held an emergency meeting. One technician, visibly shaking, reported, "We can't find the breach. There's no trace of infiltration. But these errors, they target our system's exact weaknesses." Whitaker slammed the table. "Who did this?" No one answered, but everyone was thinking the same name. In a small bar in South London, Jamal sat surrounded by other airport staff, people who had stayed silent, witnessed discrimination, and said nothing. Tonight, they came to him. "You stood up, and you didn't get crushed," a woman said. "Maybe it's time we did something too." Jamal didn't make speeches. He simply nodded and held up a USB drive. "Inside is an anonymous report form. Fill it out, send it to this email. The rest is taken care of." He turned back, eyes steady. No one stands alone anymore. At exactly 9 p.m., a video dropped on Julian Rhodes's official YouTube channel. No logos, no music, just Julian seated under soft lights, looking straight into the camera. "I didn't come here asking for pity. I'm not wounded by the actions of a few. I'm driven by the silence of the many. And today, I've decided, no more silence. Not because I was mistreated, but because if armed with power, wealth, technology, and global influence can still be deemed unfit to sit in a first-class lounge, then how many others have been silently denied opportunity without ever knowing? This isn't just about me. This is about all of us." The screen faded to black. One sentence appeared. "We are not here to claim privilege. We are here to reclaim dignity." 12 hours later, Crown Atlantic's board of directors called an emergency session. 12 hours after that, a CEO was removed, and a single whisper had shaken an empire. The next morning, Crown Atlantic's comms office looked like a battlefield, but they had no idea that in a quiet basement at Orion Tech headquarters, a very different meeting was underway. At the center of the room was a massive digital map, Crown Atlantic's entire power network, the board, shell companies, political partners, legal shields built over 2 decades. Julian stood, pointing to the center. "This isn't just an airline. This is a system designed to exclude, manipulate, and profit from injustice. And like any system, it has a weakness." Caroline Voss nodded and opened a classified dossier. "We found proof that Crown Atlantic repeatedly suppressed internal complaints, altered flight safety data, and buried over 20 lawsuits involving racial discrimination." Leah Okoro chimed in. "We've also confirmed 3 board members have ties to shell company transactions in the Cayman Islands. Potential grounds for money laundering if we pursue it." Julian crossed his arms, gaze razor sharp. "We're not just tearing down an image, we're decoding the entire structure behind it, but," he paused, "we need people on the inside." Leah was ready. She displayed a list of employees willing to testify, flight attendants, IT engineers, even mid-level managers. They've all seen it. They all wanted to speak, but they were silenced, threatened, or bought off. "They're not afraid anymore," Caroline whispered. Julian nodded. "Activate Phase 3. Justice doesn't come from outrage. It comes from strategy." Meanwhile, at Crown Atlantic HQ, Ethan Ross, the shadow architect of every crisis containment playbook, was unraveling. Leak after leak. Insiders releasing troves of evidence like vaults being opened one by one. "They know too much," Ethan hissed. "It's like we're fighting a ghost." On his desk was a neutralized list. Jamal Barnes, Erica Dawson, Victor Grant, Helen Voss, and at the top, Julian Rhodes. He picked up the phone and dialed Charles Whitmore, the chairman recently suspended. "I need an unlimited budget," Ethan said flatly. "We have to strike back. Now, at any cost." Charles's voice rang out, seething with fury. "Take whatever you need. Just don't let that kid win." But when justice is strategic, retaliation becomes meaningless. That very night, a new video exploded across the internet. An internal recording of a Crown Atlantic leadership meeting. "We need tighter control over the first-class image. Start screening out passengers who don't quite fit the usual look. You know who I mean." The video was masterfully spliced with statistics from over 8,000 passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment. juxtaposed with footage of forced smiles, sidelong glances, and bitter silences from frontline employees. A comment under the video read, "I've seen this before." I turned away. Next time, I won't be silent. Elsewhere in the city, Victor Grant, former head of airport security, was preparing for his first national TV interview. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie, a somber look in his eyes. "Are you ready?" Leah asked via video call. "I'm ready," Victor replied, voice steady. "It's time we stop just following procedures. It's time to tell the truth." When he appeared on screen, stern yet composed, his voice pierced through a system long hidden behind the mask of protocol. "I used to believe I was protecting safety, but I turned a blind eye to discrimination. I'm sorry. And today, I choose to stand with the truth." At that same moment, Caroline Voss met privately with a group of Crown Atlantic's minority shareholders, those who had never held real sway, but now saw a chance to help turn the tide. "You have two choices," she told them. "Let this company collapse, or join us in rebuilding it from the ground up, into an airline worth being proud of." An older investor raised an eyebrow. "You're trying to take control?" Caroline smiled calmly. "No, I'm trying to return power to ethics." At Orion Tech's mission room, Julian watched real-time global data scroll across multiple screens. Every minute, new comments, shares, and messages poured in from every continent. Not just Black Americans, but international allies, civil rights groups, tech influencers, journalists. They all stood behind him. A tweet from a prominent British legal scholar read, "Julian is not alone. We stand with him. No one gets to decide who belongs in first class by the color of their skin." Julian closed his eyes briefly. In that moment, he remembered being left alone at a bus stop as a child because he didn't belong in the front seat. He remembered his mother's eyes, patient, resigned, carrying a nameless sorrow. Today, that sorrow had a name, and soon it would have an answer. Later that day, Leah handed Julian a file, a sprawling power map linking Crown Atlantic to Wall Street financiers, politicians, and investment firms. The same ones who once turned him away for being too young, too black. "You still want to go all the way?" she asked. Julian's eyes lit up as he stared at the file. "Not for me, for those after me, for those without an Orion Tech, for those barred from first class their entire lives, not for what they've done, but for the skin they were born in. I'm not seeking justice for myself. I came to redesign the system." One day before his hearing at the U.S. Federal Transportation Commission, Julian Rhodes appeared on the nation's most watched evening news show. Sitting across from him was Natalie Reynolds, a veteran journalist known for her unforgiving interviews. But tonight, there were no sharp questions. Just silence, listening, and millions of eyes fixed on the screen. "Julian," she began softly, "can you tell the audience what really happened that day at Heathrow?" Julian nodded slightly, his voice calm and measured. "What happened that day wasn't the first time I was dismissed because of my skin, but it was the first time I had enough power, enough preparation, and enough responsibility to not stay silent." He spoke, not pleading, not asking for pity, just truth, about how a stranger told him he didn't belong in first class, about the cold eyes of airline staff, about the guard who asked, "Are you sure this ticket is yours?" And finally, the quiet call he made, "Activate Protocol Obsidian." The studio fell into stunned silence. "Obsidian is not an attack," Julian said. "It's a mirror, a system that reflects exactly what happened, nothing more, nothing less." Then he looked straight into the camera. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice. I don't want to destroy an airline. I want to change how the world treats people like me." That evening, social media erupted. The hashtag Julian is not alone crossed 10 million shares in under 4 hours. People of color across every profession, teachers, engineers, doctors, pilots, began sharing their stories of being doubted, dismissed, or disrespected. A black flight attendant from Crown Atlantic, posting anonymously, wrote, "I once saw a white passenger request a seat change because they didn't want to sit next to a person of color. And the airline agreed. They apologized to the racist. I had to bite my tongue." A Latinx traveler shared a video of being denied boarding in first class, despite having a valid ticket. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together, and the world finally saw the full picture. Inside Crown Atlantic's headquarters, Ethan Ross, director of crisis management, realized the unthinkable. They had lost control of the narrative. No retraction was strong enough. No celebrity dared defend them. And most critically, major investors were dumping stock. "We're losing everything," Ethan gasped. Charles Whitmore, the suspended chairman, roared, "Why the hell is every media outlet siding with that kid?" Ethan slammed a dossier onto the table. "Because that kid now has a full team, investigators, lawyers, white-hat hackers, independent journalists, and a cause the world actually believes in. This isn't a PR crisis anymore," he said. "It's an uprising." In a congressional hearing room, Congresswoman Maya Salazar stood before the Federal Aviation Committee. If someone like Julian Rhodes, a billionaire CEO, a technologist once invited to the Oval Office, can still be treated like a criminal at an airport gate, then what's happening every day to passengers with no cameras, no connections, no power? Crown Atlantic doesn't just owe an apology. They owe accountability. The hearing room erupted in applause, something rarely seen in politics. The next morning, 12 major news networks aired the same banner headline, "The Obsidian Campaign, an Empire Exposed." In a powerful 45-minute expose, millions of viewers watched. Leaked internal documents from Crown Atlantic, evidence of money laundering via offshore shell companies, blatantly discriminatory emails between executives, a recruitment, marketing, seating, and training system engineered to subtly exclude people of color from premium spaces. The final shot, white text on a black screen. Justice doesn't begin with outrage. It begins with truth. And today, that truth has been told. That night, Julian received a video call from someone he never expected, Helen Voss, vice president of Crown Atlantic, long regarded as the neutral one. "What do you want, Julian?" Her voice was tired but honest. Julian looked at her for a long moment, then replied, "I don't want to bury 28,000 honest workers alongside a rotten boardroom. I want this airline to live, just with a new soul." Helen sighed. "If I back you, what happens next?" Julian answered quietly, "We'll build an airline where everyone is welcome, and it won't be called Crown anymore." 3 days after his searing speech before Congress and the expose that shook the aviation world, a bombshell announcement hit the stock exchange. Crown Atlantic officially acquired. New owner, Obsidian Group. Once a proud icon in the city skyline, the airline's headquarters now bore a white banner with crisp black lettering. "Welcome to a new chapter." Here, everyone has a seat. In a sealed boardroom atop Obsidian Tower, Julian Rhodes entered, now under a modest placard. Interim CEO, Julian Rhodes. Across from him sat what used to be the impossible opposition. Helen Voss, former executive VP of Crown Atlantic. Jamal Barnes, once threatened, now Chief Customer Experience Advisor. Erica Lee, a former flight operations supervisor who had once secretly recorded internal discrimination. Julian looked at the three of them and said with calm gravity, "We're not here for revenge. We're here to rewrite the rules." Then, he switched on the projector. The first slide read, 9 pillars of a new airline. 1. Transparent booking system. 2. Anonymous reporting channels for staff and passengers. 3. Full retraining on equality and customer experience. 4. Ethics Council with multi-ethnic representation. 5. Partnerships with nonprofit organizations for social justice. 6. Elimination of covert seat classification based on appearance or background. 7. New benefits for staff previously silenced or marginalized. 8. Travel Access Fund for students from remote or underserved areas. 9. Rename the airline. Jamal was the first to speak. "What's the new name?" Julian answered with a smile, Equair, short for equality in the air. Within 72 hours, every Crown Atlantic logo was removed, from websites, apps, headquarters, even aircraft. In its place, a turquoise wing, stylized from the letter E. A wing that cared not for skin color, gender, or social class, only the right to rise. At the same time, Obsidian's communications team released a video that opened with a line that shook the internet. "Once, there was an airline that made only a few people feel welcome. Tomorrow, we're building a place where everyone has a seat and a voice." Meanwhile, the decayed internal system of Crown Atlantic began to collapse. Executives who once silenced whistleblowers were now being summoned for hearings, some already under financial investigation. Ethan Ross, the PR director who orchestrated smear campaigns against Julian, was exposed. Every email, contract, and surveillance order leaked. One leaked message from Ethan sparked global outrage. Sometimes you have to block them at the gate. Saves trouble later. In mere hours, Ross must fall trended worldwide. Ethan was fired, and now faces federal charges for abuse of power, privacy violations, and obstruction of justice. As the media tracked Julian's every move, something quieter but deeply powerful was happening elsewhere. At South London High, the school that once rejected Julian for being too different, a new plaque was unveiled at the library, Julian Rhodes Center for Technology and Social Justice. Mrs. Geller, Julian's former teacher, now retired, attended the ceremony with tearful eyes. Back then, she whispered to a reporter, "I told the principal we just lost a genius because of bias. Today, I see that boy has helped change an entire industry." On Equare's official launch day, hundreds of reporters gathered at New York JFK Airport. On the giant screen, a launch video played, narrated by Julian himself. "I was once removed from a first-class lounge, not because I didn't have a ticket, but because I didn't look like someone who belonged there. Today, I invite you to sit beside me, in first class, in economy, wherever you choose. Because here, no one is unwelcome." A thunderous applause rose as the first Equare jet took flight. At that exact moment, in a federal prison in Georgia, Charles Whitmore, former CEO of Crown Atlantic, watched the broadcast on a small wall-mounted TV. He sat in silence, the arrogance long gone. His hands clenched around a plastic cup, as if letting go might shatter the last remnants of a shattered empire. "Julian," he muttered, "you did what I once thought was impossible. Somewhere else across the country, on Equare's inaugural flight, a 9-year-old girl sat beside her mother. 'Mom, why is that black man getting photographed so much?' The mother smiled gently, 'Because he turned a place that once rejected people like us into a place that welcomes everyone.'" At dawn, Heathrow International Airport, once the backdrop of that infamous act of discrimination, stood transformed. The entire international terminal now adorned with deep blue banners, boldly stating, "Obsidian Air, where everyone belongs." No more side glances, no more whispered biases. Today, the very ground that once stripped a man of dignity was now the foundation of a justice-born empire. In the central plaza of the airport, a quiet but powerful ceremony was held. Hundreds of Obsidian Air employees, pilots, flight attendants, baggage handlers, lined up behind a simple wooden podium. Julian Rhodes took the stage. "If you'd like, I can continue the closing speech or give you the script for this scene in cinematic format." "What's tip, Theo?" Standing before them was the man who had led them all through the storm. Julian Rhodes. He wore a simple gray suit, not as polished as the one he'd worn the day he was denied entry to a first-class lounge, but his eyes shone brighter than ever. Stepping up to the podium, Julian paused. He looked around and took a deep breath, like he was inhaling every old memory, every scar once layered across this very place. Then he spoke, clear, steady, and deeply human. "I never wanted to fly higher than anyone else. I only ever wanted one thing, that everyone gets the chance to take off. Today, we're not just flying farther, we're not flying higher, we're flying fairer." The applause cracked like thunder. Some staff behind him, black, white, Asian, Latin, wiped away silent tears. Obsidian Air wasn't just a new airline, it was a declaration of a new generation. A transparent oversight system was launched, every complaint recorded, reviewed by an independent ethics council. All employees, from top management to newly hired crew, were required to complete intensive training in racial equity, unconscious bias, and inclusive customer care. An anonymous feedback tool was integrated into the airline app, allowing passengers to evaluate every interaction, every glance, every tone, without fear of being ignored, and the ripple effect exceeded all expectations. Within 30 days of launch, other airlines began facing pressure from customers and shareholders alike. The hashtag Fair Skies for All went viral. People who once stayed silent began to speak up, from Kenya to Canada, from the Philippines to France. Messages poured in to Obsidian Air. "I was once dismissed just because of my name. Now I want to fly with you. My mom's been a flight attendant for 20 years, never promoted once. Thank you for changing the rules. One day, I'll take my daughter on a flight where she knows she belongs." At the end of the launch recap video, the camera slowly zooms in on Julian's face, standing among hundreds of employees, with a gleaming obsidian blue Boeing 787 behind them. He didn't smile broadly, but in his eyes once filled with the pain of rejection, was now the quiet strength of someone who reclaimed what was always rightfully his, and chose to share it with everyone. This isn't just about flying planes. It's about flying fair, obsidian air where everyone belongs. If this story moved you, share it, comment, and tell us. What would you do when faced with injustice? Because maybe, just maybe, one small action could change an entire empire. If you're still thinking about what just unfolded, you're not alone. We've just witnessed a story not only about injustice, but about how one person, with intellect, courage, and unwavering resolve, can force an entire system to reckon with itself. Julian Rhodes didn't destroy to get revenge. He rebuilt to make it better. And Obsidian Air isn't just an airline. It's a reminder that everyone deserves to take flight, with their dignity intact. If this story stirred your anger, your hope, your admiration, or your heart, don't forget to comment, share this video, and subscribe to Viva Stories so you never miss the next journey of justice and inspiration. Because someday, the next story told might just be yours. We are Aiva, and this is where justice takes flight.